Welcome back to the deep dive. I hope you're sitting down for this one because we are about to unpack a $200 million disaster.
That is certainly one way to open the show.
Well, we have to be honest, right? We're talking about a movie that had, everything going for it on paper. It had the backing of the biggest studio on the planet, Disney.
A massive budget.
A massive budget, one of the most beloved stories in modern history.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow, it didn't just stumble, it crashed.
No.
We were talking, of course, about the 2020 live-action adaptation of Mulan.
It's a fascinating case study in how to get almost everything wrong while, claiming you're trying to do everything. Usually when a movie fails, you can point to one big thing.
Right.
Maybe the budget ran out, maybe the acting was a little wooden, but here we have a stack of critiques. We're drawing from these really detailed deep dives by Jedi Brooks, Cellspecs, the critical drinker, the mythology guy, and Amanda the Jedi, and they aren't just nitpicking plot holes.
No. They are tearing into the absolute DNA of this film.
Exact. The consensus from these sources, and we're talking about a pretty diverse group here, you've got film editors, you've got mythology experts, is that this film is a fundamental misunderstanding.
And not just the cartoon.
No, that's the key. Not just the Disney cartoon from 1998. They're saying it misunderstands the actual Chinese folklore, the filmmaking language of the wuxia genre, and even the feminist message it tries so hard to push.
It's a triple threat of failure. And honestly, I think the mission for this deep dive is to figure out how that happens. How do you spend that much money and end up with a product that alienates the fans of the original animation, the history buffs, and the Chinese audience you were specifically trying to court?
To understand that, I think we have to start with what we're calling the big disc. Do you remember the marketing for this movie? It was everywhere.
Oh, vividly. It was all about being grown up. I remember the director, Nicky Guerrero, giving all these interviews saying they were stripping away the kiddie stuff, no songs, no Mushu.
Right. No Eddie Murphy Dragon. That was the big headline.
Which, look, I get it. I really do. If you want to make a serious war epic, something like a Braveheart, but set in Imperial China, you probably can't have a sass-talking lizard roasting marshmallows on a campfire. It doesn't fit the tone.
That was the pitch, exactly. Realism, grounded. They kept saying they were going back to the original Ballad of Mulan from, the Northern Wei dynasty. They wanted to honor the history.
But then you actually press play on the movie. And I think for a lot of people, the confusion set in within, the first 5 minutes.
What was the first thing you saw that just threw you off?
It's just so jarring. You have a wit who can shapeshift into a flock of hawks. You've got this phoenix that looks like a neon kite sort of floating around Mulan. And then there's Mulan herself doing parkour off rooftops like she's in a Spider-Man. That is the tonal whiplash that Cellspecs really hammers home in her critique. The movie is suffering from a massive identity crisis. On the one hand, the color grading is drab, it's gray, it's grim.
Super serious. Yeah, nobody smiles. It looks like a funeral dirge because they want you to know it's serious cinema.
But on the other hand, the actual script is pure high fantasy.
But it's bad fantasy. That's the problem. It's fantasy without the whimsy or any kind of internal logic. They removed the songs because they weren't realistic, but then they inserted magic that completely breaks the reality of the war story they claim they're telling.
It feels like they were kind of embarrassed to be making a Disney movie, but at the same time, they didn't really know how to make a proper wuxia movie either.
That is a perfect transition into the biggest. This is the one thing that every single one of our sources, from the feminist perspective of Amanda the Jedi to the cultural lens of the mythology guy, they all pointed to this as the fatal flaw, the key problem.
Let's dig into this because this one change, this one little tweak, it changes everything about the character. In the 1998 cartoon, Mulan's origin is pretty simple. She's kind of a mess.
That's a little harsh, but yeah, pretty accurate.
No, really. She's late for her chores. She cheats on her test at the matchmaker by writing notes on her arm. She's skinny. She's physically weaker than every single man in the camp. When she joins the army, she is objectively the worst soldier there.
And that is exactly why we love her. Her journey in 1998 is the classic. She's an ordinary person who thrust ordinaries, can't overpower the men, can't outrun. So what is she?
She outthinks them. She uses leverage. She uses her brain. It's about ingenuity, not brute strength.
Okay, so paint the picture for the 2020. How does that move start?
In the 2020 film, the movie opens with her as a child, and she's chasing a chicken. But she isn't just running after it. She's flipping, she's jumping, she's gliding across rooftops. The narrator, her own father, tells us immediately that she possesses an immense amount of chi.
And we really need to clarify this for the listener because chi is a real concept, not something Disney just invented out of thin air.
Right. In traditional Chinese philosophy and medicine, qi is life force. It flows through everyone. It flows through you, me, the trees, the ground. Things like breathing exercises, Tai Chi. It's all about cultivating that flow of energy. It's democratic. Everyone has it.
But in the movie?
In the movie, qi is treated like it's the midichlorians from Star Wars.
Yeah.
or, the X gene from X-Men. It is a superpower that only certain special people have. And crucially, the movie frames it as something that is inherently masculine.
The critical drinker made a really big point about this. The narrator, her father, basically says she has too much chi for a girl.
Right. Which implies that chi is basically just magical testosterone. It's a really weird biological essentialist argument. But just stick with the narrative implications for a second. If Mulan is born with super agility and super strength, what happens to her struggle?
Well, it just disappears. If she's already the best warrior in the village when she's 7 years old, then boot camp isn't a challenge. It's just an inquiry.
Precisely. Jedi Brooks calls this the Mary Sue problem. And I know that term gets thrown around a lot on the internet, sometimes unfairly to dismiss female characters.
It can be a lazy buzzword, for sure. But in this specific context, Brooks is using it to describe a very specific narrative structure. A Mary Sue is defined as a character who is devoid of any real internal conflict because they are just too powerful. They don't have to learn. They just have to.
There is no better example of this than the training montage. I actually watched the comparison clips that Amanda the Jedi put together side by side, and it's honestly heartbreaking. You don't realize how good the 1998 script was until you see it dismantled like this.
Walk us through the pole scene. I think that is the definitive moment for this entire...
Okay, so in the cartoon, the captain, Li Shang, he shoots an arrow to the top of this massive wooden pole. He gives the soldiers 2 heavy bronze weights, one representing discipline and one representing strength. He says, retrieve the arrow.
And it's meant to be physically impossible to just climb it with them in your hand.
Right. The other soldiers all try to climb using brute strength. They pull themselves up, but the weights just drag them right back down. Yao, the big guy, fails. Mulan tries. She fails. She slips. She gets blisters. She is completely humiliated. The captain literally tells her to pack up and go home.
It's her lowest point, her rock bottom.
It is. But then, and this is just pure cinema magic, she sees the weights differently. It's sunrise. The I'll make a man out of you music swells. She realizes she can't pull the weights up with her, so she ties them together. She wraps the cloth around the pole, and she uses the weights as a counterbalance to pull herself up, step by step.
It's physics. It's leverage. It's not about being stronger.
It is intelligence. The aha moment isn't I am strong now. The moment is I am smart. She succeeds not by becoming a man, but by using her brain to solve a problem that the men couldn't solve with just their muscles.
That single moment defines her entire character. Now ruin it for me. Tell me about the 20.
So in the live action movie, the task is different. They have to carry 2 buckets of water up a mountainside with their arms held out straight.
Classic Shaolin monk imagery. I can see what they were going for.
Sure. And at first, Mulan struggles. She's shaking, she's spilling the water.
Yeah.
But the movie makes it really clear she isn't struggling because she's weak.
So why is she struggling then?
Because she is pretending to be. She is actively hiding her chi. The moment she decides to drop the act, the music kicks in. She stops panting. She stabilizes her arms. And she literally sprints up the mountain. She just breezes past everyone else like it's nothing.
So she didn't learn a new technique. She didn't have an epiphany about how to do it better.
She just stopped lying about how powerful.
That completely changes the moral of the story. The 1998 message is, if you work hard and you use your wits, you can overcome any natural disadvantages. The 2020 message is, if you were born with magical blood, you will win. If you weren't, well, sorry.
It's elite. That's what so many of the critics are arguing. It takes a democratic story that anyone can be a hero, and it turns it into an aristocratic one that only the chosen ones can be heroes.
And Amanda the Jedi pointed out the complete hypocrisy in the marker. She mentioned that Nikki Caro, the director, kept saying in interviews, we don't want a superhero. But then they give her the ability to kick arrows out of the air.
Yeah.
To run up walls.
That's the Matrix comparison Jedi Brooks made. There's a scene later, and we'll get to the battle in a bit, but there's a moment where she is literally kicking spears out of the air and catching swords. It stops being a war movie. It becomes a superhero movie, but really boring, because most superheroes at least have a weak, a kryptonite, an emotional trauma.
Mulan's only weakness in this movie is that society is mean to her for being a girl.
Correct. And that leads to this really bizarre obsession the movie has with truth. The script seems to think that the reason Mulan isn't dominating everyone constantly is because her chi is being blocked by her dishonesty about her gender.
Your deceit weakens you. That's the line the witch says to her, isn't it?
Which, if you just think about it for more than 2 seconds, makes absolutely no sense at all.
Why?
Because deception is a fundamental part of warfare, the art of war by Sun Tzu. The first rule is all warfare is based on deception.
Laughs. That is a very, very good point. Being a spy doesn't make you weak. Wearing camouflage.
But the movie treats truth as this magical stat boost. If Mulan admits she's a girl, her power level goes over 9,000 if she lies. This leads us to the single most criticized scene in the entire film, the armor scene.
Oh God, I remember watching this for the first time and just shouting at my TV.
Set the scene for us. What's happening?
Okay, so the Roran army is attacking. We are in a full-scale battle. Arrows are raining down. People are dying left and right. It's complete chaos. Mulan is riding her horse, and she has this epiphany. She realizes she can't fight at her full power because she's wearing a disguise.
So what is she?
She strips. In the middle of the kill zone, she takes off her helmet. She throws away her chest plate. She undoes her hair so it can flow majestically in the wind. She literally removes the only thing stabbed or shot.
Tactically, it is absolute soup. But CellSpecs points out something even worse. It's a continuity error based on the movie's own internal logic. Just a few scenes prior to this, Mulan was hit in the chest by a throwing star.
Right. And the only reason she survives is because she had the thick leather binding wrapped around her chest to hide her gender.
So the disguise literally saved her life. The lie protected her from a fatal blow. But now, the movie argues that the lie is poison, so she removes the armor to show off her gender, implying that being true is more important than, not dying a horrible death.
Now, contrast this with the reveal in the cartoon. That scene was traumatic for her.
It was devastating. In 1998, she confronts Shan Yu. She's the one who brilliantly creates the apple. But in the process, Shan Yu slices her across the chest. She passes out from blood loss. The reveal happens in a medical tent. She wakes up, and the medic is there, looking absolutely terrified.
It's a disaster. She didn't want to be found out. She was terrified of execution. That creates genuine tension and stake.
In the 2020 version, because she reveals herself voluntarily to get a power-up, it completely removes the stakes. She isn't afraid of the consequences. She's just tired of the costume.
And then she rides back into battle without any armor on.
And as Jedi Brooks notes, she essentially becomes a god. She rides back in and single-handedly destroys the entire enemy flank. She moves so fast the camera can barely even track her. Jedi Brooks actually used the word teleports because she seems to just zip from the front lines to way behind the enemy lines in a matter of seconds.
Which brings us to the reaction of the other soldier, this I believe Mulan moment.
Oh, this is where the emotional core of the movie just completely hollows out. In the animated film, we spent the better part of an hour watching these guys bond.
We got a girl worth fighting for. We got the bathing scene, the training montage. They were bros. They ate the same terrible porridge together.
They went from total strangers who hated each other to brothers in arms. So when they find out she's a woman, they feel betrayed. They leave her in the snow. And it hurts because we know they actually care about her. So when they finally accept her later in the film, it's earned.
In the 2020 movie, I don't think she barely spoke to them.
She was aloof. She wouldn't shower with them. She avoided conversation to hide her voice. There is zero chemistry between her and the rest of the squad.
So she gets kicked out. She comes back 20 minutes later and says, "Hey guys, the Emperor is in danger." And immediately the commander, the guy she has been lying to this whole time, just goes, "I believe Hua Mulan."
And then the whole squad starts chanting it. It just feels so unearned. The critical drinker calls this unearned camaraderie. The writers knew they needed that emotional payoff where the men finally respect her, so they just wrote it into the script. But they didn't do any of the legwork to make us, the audience, feel it.
It's just checking a box on a screenwriting checklist. Insert empowerment moment here. But without the foundation, it just rings hollow.
Now, Disney tried to deflect a lot of this kind of criticism by saying, well, hold on, we aren't remaking the cartoon. We're being faithful to the original Ballad of Mulan.
Ah, the historical defense. It's not bad writing, it's history.
But the mythology guy?
Yeah.
Oh man, he did not let them get away with that one. He actually went through the original poem line by line and compared it to the film.
And what did he find?
He argues that the 2020 film is actually less faithful to the ballad than the cartoon was.
Wait, how is that even possible? That seems completely counterintuitive.
Well, let's look at the ballad itself. It's a very grounded poem. Mulan fights for 10 or 12 years, is a soldier, she isn't a superhero. There's absolutely no magic. There is.
And crucially, in the poem, is she ever discovered during the war?
No, that's the big thing. In the poem, she serves her entire term of service disguised as a man, and nobody ever finds out. She retires, she goes home, and when her old army buddies come to visit her later, that is when she finally reveals, and they're all completely shocked.
So the whole revealing herself in the middle of a battle to unlock her chi powers plot, that's pure Hollywood invention.
100% pure invention. So for Disney to claim historical accuracy while adding witches and magic energy blasts is, well, just disingenuous.
And we have to talk about the Phoenix, because this is where the cultural confusion really peaks.
Tied on a string.
They replaced Mushu the dragon because they said dragons were too silly and not enough. But they replaced him with the CGI phoenix that just sort of follows Mulan around. And in the movie, Mulan's father says the phoenix rises from the ash.
Which is a very famous myth.
It is a very famous Western myth. That is the Greek. The mythology guy points out that the Chinese phoenix, the Feng Wang, is a completely different symbol with a different...
Okay, so what does the Feng Wang represent in Chinese culture?
It represents virtue, grace, and the union of yin and yang. It is often paired with the dragon, who represents as a symbol of the emperor. It does not burst into flames and get reborn from the ash. That is not a thing in Chinese mythology.
So they just took a visual symbol from China, and then they pasted a Wikipedia definition of a Greek myth directly onto it.
While claiming to be culturally authentic. Yeah. It's a really superficial aesthetic overlay that shows they didn't do.
And speaking of awkward cultural fits, let's talk about some of the dialogue. The two rabbits line.
Oh, this was so painful to watch.
The mythology guy pointed this out. The original poem ends with this beautiful, subtle metaphor. It says, essentially, when two rabbits run side by side, who can tell which is the male and which is the female?
It's a poetic way of saying that in the chaos of war, gender doesn't matter. Only skill matters.
It's a beautiful sentiment. Now, in the movie, how do they handle it?
Mulan is just riding her horse. She looks down at the ground. She sees two rabbits running, and she says in a very serious voiceover, I think one was a male, one was a female.
Laughs. It's just so literal. It's so clumsy. It's like they're hitting you over the head with the theme.
Cell Specs called it rushed eloquence. It feels like some executive in a meeting said, we need to make sure we quote the poem, so the screenwriters just jammed it in there without any of the nuance or understanding of the original metaphor.
It really connects back to the overall writing quality, which brings us to the cast of characters. We have some new characters and some pretty glaring omissions.
Let's start with the elephant in the room, the removal of Captain Li Shang.
R.I.P. to a bisexual icon.
Indeed. Now, the producers were actually very open about this. They stated in interviews that in the era of the Me Too movement, they felt that having a commanding officer as a love interest was inappropriate. They didn't want that kind of power imbalance.
Which, on the surface, that sounds like a very noble and progressive sentiment. We want to be ethical in our storytelling.
However, our sources, particularly Jedi Brooks and the mythology guy, they argue that this reasoning completely backfired.
How so?
Well, first off, if you actually watch the 1998, Li Shang doesn't make a single romantic move on Mulan while she is bored. The romance is purely implied through mutual respect. It only actually blossoms after the war is over, when she is a civilian again and they are on equal.
So the Me Too issue they were trying to fix wasn't really there to begin with.
Exactly. But now look at the replacement. They split Li Shang's character into, you have Commander Tung, who is a sort of generic father figure, and then you have Hong Wei, a fellow soldier who is meant to be the new love interest.
Yeah, Hong Wei is he's weird. Cell Specs mentioned that barracks.
The I sniffed your neck scene.
Yeah. He just walks up to her in the barracks and says, you stink, and implies he was sniffing her up close.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be flirting, I guess. But because Mulan is so terrified of being found out, she just looks deeply uncomfortable.
And that's the irony that the critics really honed in. By trying to sanitize the romance to avoid any problematic power dynamic, they accidentally replaced a relationship built on mutual respect with a dynamic that feels kind of creepy. There's no development. They just stare at each other in tense time.
And let's talk about the big new addition, the witch, Zhang Yang, played by the legendary Gong Li.
A character created specifically for this film. She's meant to be a foil. She has the same chi powers, but she was rejected by society for turning.
Cell Specs and The Drinker compared her to a T-1000 from the Terminator movies. She can shapeshift. She's incredibly powerful. She can take out a whole garrison of guards in seconds without breaking a sweat.
But here is the major critique from pretty much every source. If she is so powerful, why is she serving the main villain?
That's what I didn't get at all. Bori Khan's just some guy. He's not magical. He's not particularly smart. He's just angry. Why is this all-powerful witch taking orders from him?
The movie tries to say it's because she has no place in the world, so she clings to the one man who will power. But the critics found this completely unconvincing. She could easily kill him and lead the army herself. She is by far the strongest person in the entire movie.
And her death, it makes no sense. She sacrifices herself to save Mulan from an arrow.
An arrow that Mulan, who has already been established as a Jedi master who can litter arrows out of the air, could have easily stopped herself.
It felt so unnecessary. It's like the writers didn't know what to do with her character, so they just killed her off to give Mulan a sad moment before the final boss.
And then there is Bori Khan himself, compared to Shan Yu from the animation.
Shan Yu was terrifying. He had that hawk, he had those chilling yellow eyes. He barely spoke, but when he did, it was unforgettable. How many men does it take to deliver a message?
Bori Khan, by comparison, is described by the critical drinker as a generic, disposable villain. He wants revenge for his father, he shouts a lot, he runs around, but he lacks any real menace. He feels like a video game mini-boss.
So we've got a confused story, a misunderstood culture, and a cast of weak characters. But surely with $200 million, the action must be good, right?
You would absolutely think so. But this brings us to Section 5, the technical failure. And this is where the critics who really know film production and editing just went to town.
I was shocked when I heard the critics talk about this. I just assumed the one thing Disney would absolutely nail is the spectacle. But Cell Specs and Amanda the Jedi both describe the action as floaty.
They are attempting to emulate the wuxia style. For listeners who might not know, wuxia is the Chinese martial arts fantasy genre. You should think of films like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, or Hero.
Wuxia has a very specific flow to it. It's almost like a ballet. The wire work is supposed to look elegant, almost dreamlike.
Right. In this film, the critics argue it just looks like bad physics. There are shots where Mulan does a backflip on a horse, or where soldiers run vertically up a wall at a perfect 90-degree angle, and it doesn't look stylistic. It just looks like a video game glitch. It lacks the weight and the choreography of true wuxia film.
And the editing. Cell Specs pointed out a fight scene with Donnie Yen. Now, Donnie Yen is a living legend. He's Ip Man. You hire him to do amazing kung fu.
And yet the editor cuts away from him constantly. There's this one moment where he does this incredible, elaborate sword spin, a really cool move, and the camera cuts away to a reaction shot of some soldiers just standing there watching.
It just breaks the momentum.
It's a violation of basic action filmmaking. You want to see the impact of the moves. You want to see the flow. Here, they use rapid cuts, what we often call shaky cam, to hide the fact that the actors aren't actually connecting with their hit. It just creates a chaotic, messy visual where you can't even tell where anyone is.
And speaking of where anyone is, let's talk about the geography of the battle. Jedi Brooks mentioned the teleporting Mulan.
It's the total lack of establishing shots. 1 second Mulan seems to be at the front of the army, then suddenly she's way behind enemy lines on a mount, then she's back at the fort. There is no sense of space or distance.
And the setting itself. The story is supposed to be taking place on the Silk Road in northwest China, the Gobi Desert.
But they filmed most of it in New Zealand.
And apparently, you can really tell.
Oh, you can. The lighting, the vegetation. It looks like Middle-earth from Lord of the Rings. It doesn't look like the dry, arid landscape where the story is supposed to be set. It just adds to that overall feeling of inauthenticity.
But the biggest tactical flaw, the one plot hole that seemed to drive all the critics absolutely crazy, was the avalanche.
Oh, the avalanche! This is a masterclass in bad writing.
Okay, explain this to me. Because in the cartoon, the avalanche makes perfect sense.
In the cartoon, the entire Hun army is charging down a narrow mountain pass. Mulan sees that she only has one rocket. She grabs it. She runs forward into danger and fires it at a cliff face to cause the snow to fall on top. It is her aim, her agency.
Okay, and in the 2020 movie?
In the 2020 movie, the bad guys have a trebuchet, a giant catapult. Mulan is standing on a snowy mountain ridge way behind. She sort of taunts them, trying to trick them into firing at her.
Okay, but why would they fire a massive siege weapon at one single person? Why not just shoot her with an arrow? Or, just ignore her and keep attacking the army in front of them?
That is the million-dollar question. The villain inexplicably orders the trebuchet to fire. The giant rock misses Mulan entirely, hits the mountain she's standing near, and causes the avalanche that wipes out.
So Mulan's victory relies entirely on the villain being a complete idiot.
Exactly. It completely robs her of her cleverness.
Yeah.
She didn't defeat them. They defeated themselves because they were stupid enough to fire a cannon at the mountain they were standing directly under.
It's those little details that just strip away the hero's agency again and again. In the cartoon, she was smart. In this one, everyone else is just dumb.
Which leads us, I think, to the most contentious part of this whole discussion, the message.
The feminist message.
Disney marketed this as the ultimate empowering movie for young girls. Loyal, brave, true.
But our sources argue it's actually regressed, that it takes a huge step backward from the 1990s.
Let's look at that strong female character. The critics argue that by making Mulan perfect and super-powered from birth, the film accidentally implies that women cannot compete with men unless they are magical, genetic anomalies.
It's that toxic empowerment that Cell Specs talked about. The movie seems to have this weird disdain for anything traditionally feminine.
Yes, look at the sister character. Mulan has a sister in this version who didn't exist in the cartoon. And what is her one defining character?
She's afraid of spiders.
She screams at a spider. She causes a total panic at the matchmaker. She's portrayed as weak, silly, and frantic. The movie constantly juxtaposes her against Mulan to say, see, Mulan is good, isn't like...
Which is such a dated and frankly insulting way of writing women. You don't have to dunk on the girly girl to uplift the warrior. You can be strong and still be afraid of spiders. They aren't mutually exclusive.
Exactly. But I think the most damning critique regarding the film's message comes at the very end. The resolution of Mulan's entire arc.
In the cartoon, the Emperor of China bows to Mulan. The whole of China bows. It is a complete subversion of the patriarchy. She broke all the rules, and the system itself bent to acknowledge her greatness.
In the 2020 film, Mulan's main goal is devotion to family, and by extension, service to the Emperor.
She wants to be a member of the Emperor's royal guard.
Amanda the Jedi points out the subtle but really important shift in the job offer at the end. In the 1998 film, the Emperor offers Mulan a job as his personal advisor. He hands her the crest of the Emperor. He values her mind. He wants wants her to help.
In the 2020 film, he offers her a spot in the guard. He values her sword.
And ultimately, the witch, the other powerful woman who wanted to burn the system down because it oppressed women, is killed. Mulan, who submits to the system and serves the emperor, is rewarded.
So the message is, it's okay to be a powerful woman as long as you use that power to serve the men in charge.
That is the reading that many of the critics took away. Cell-Specs went as far as to call it nationalistic propaganda. It emphasizes blind loyalty to the state above any kind of personal freedom. They even added a fourth virtue to the sword.
Right, the family sword usually says loyal, brave, true. In this one, they added devotion to family on the back.
Which, in the context of this film, really just translates to devotion to the emperor and the state. It's a very heavy shift from the more individualistic, rebellious spirit of the 90s version.
And we really cannot ignore the real-world context that surrounds this nationalistic tone. This brings us to Section 7, the controversy.
You really can't separate this film from the headlines it generates, both before and after.
First, let's talk about the lead actress, Liu Yifei.
During the Hong Kong pro-democracy protests in 2019, she made a post on social media supporting the Hong Kong, who at the time were being widely accused of brutality against the protesters,
which immediately launched the hashtag Boycott Mulan movement online. For a movie about a character who is famous for fighting against tyranny and protecting the innocent, having the lead star publicly support a government crackdown on protesters was, well, optically, it was disaster.
It completely alienated a huge portion of the potential international audience before the movie even dropped. But then when the movie finally came out, people started reading the end credits.
And they saw that Disney explicitly thanked the government publicity department of Xinjiang.
For those who don't know, Xinjiang is the region in China where there are extensive, well-documented reports of detention camps and severe human rights abuses against the Uyghur population.
So you have a movie that was partially filmed in the shadow of these camps, thanking the very government bodies responsible for them, while the film itself is preaching about truth and bravery.
It made it completely impossible for critics and for many audience members to separate the art from the politics. As Cell-Spec said, it felt like Disney was bending over backwards to please the Chinese government to get access to that box office money, even if it meant compromising their stated values.
It's an irony.
The irony is the biggest punchline of all. China hated the movie too.
That's the final verdict from the mythologist. He asks the question, who is this movie for?
It's not for fans of the animation. It's too dour and stripped of all its charm and humor. It's not for fans of the original ballad. It's too magical and wildly inaccurate, and it's not for the Chinese audience.
So why did the Chinese audience reject it?
Because they saw right through it. They saw a Western studio attempting to pander to them with a lot of superficial symbols, the phoenix, the concept of qi, the flowing sleep, while telling a story that made absolutely no sense. It felt like a costume party, not a genuine tribute.
It is a film made for no one, a product of a corporate checklist that tried to appeal to everyone, and in the process ended up alienating absolutely everybody.
And let's not forget the price tag. Because of the pandemic, this was released on Disney+, and they charged $30 for premiere access just to watch it at home.
The critical drinker's advice was pretty blunt. He just said, save yourself $30 and go watch the original, or watch Ripley from Alien, or Sarah Connor from Terminator if you want a strong female.
It really just highlights the difference between content and art. The 1998 film feels like it was made by a team who genuinely loved, they had fun with it. This felt like it was made by a committee who loved the idea of the story making a lot of money.
It's a $200 million movie that looks, as Amanda the Jedi put it, cheap and lifeless.
So if we just step back and look at the big picture here, we have a fundamental failure of a failure of cultural understanding and a failure of message.
It's a cautionary tale for Hollywood. It proves you cannot simply take a beloved property, strip out all the joy, add some half-baked girl boss moments, and expect it to resonate with people. Audiences are smarter than that.
Yeah.
They know the difference between a character who earns their heroism and a character who is just handed it by the script.
Mulan from 1998 inspired a whole generation because she was us. She was scared, she was clumsy, but she kept going anyway. Mulan from 2020 is, well, she's a stack. She's perfect, powerful from the start.
And that, I think, leads us to our final thought for you, the listener.
We've talked a lot about superpowers, about qi being treated as magic.
Right. And I want you to consider this question, which is something that came up across several of our sources.
If modern studios believe that a female character can only be considered strong if she has literal superpowers and no discernible flaws, what message are they actually sending to the young girls they claim power?
Are they accidentally saying that being a normal human woman with flaws and struggles isn't enough?
Yeah. Exactly. Is the perfect character actually the least inspiring one of all? Because if you have to be born a superhero to make a real difference, then what hope is there for the rest of us?
That is a question worth chewing on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Mulan. We will see you next time.
Stay curious.